Hello and welcome to our first of four series for the Hispanic Heritage Lunch and Learn series presented by Swope Health. We've got with us a special guest today, Jackson County Legislator Manny Abarca, who represents the first district here in Jackson County, which is essentially most of the corridor in South Kansas City. So downtown, Brookside, Waldo, the Plaza, Martin City area. Manny has been around for a while. Before he served on the Jackson County Legislature, he was a school board member here at Kansas City Public Schools. So first, I'd like to welcome Manny to our first Lunch and Learn. And we'll open it up for Manny to talk a little bit about his career and how he got started in politics. Welcome, Manny.
Thanks for having me. As my colleague Duran had suggested, my name is Manny Abarca. I was born on the Kansas side, raised on the Missouri side, graduated from Grandview High School, and then did my college stint at Missouri State and University of Central Missouri. Next to me is my son, Luca, so please enjoy his coos and groans here from now and then. Yeah, I mean, throughout that entire process, I was within student government or student councils, and that kind of eventually led to me jumping into running for office. I had previously served Congressman Cleaver for the last 8 years until I took over the role as the executive director for the Fair Contracting Alliance, where I helped do compliance work for the city of Kansas City, Missouri, and throughout the region. So glad to be here.
Well, Manny, first, let's talk a little bit about your work. I know that you sort of had an interesting trajectory and how you got into politics. But before you did all that, you worked in the congressman's office. Talk a bit about how you got in the congressman's office, what you did, sort of the projects you worked on, and how you got involved in working in the federal government.
Yeah, I mean, it was really by happenstance, right place, right time type of situation. As I matriculated through my career in the office, I ended as the deputy district director and would be in charge of hiring folks and getting them into our office or in the federal system. And so I would commonly tell people that most folks fall into this work. I mean, you just have to have a heart for public service and interest in the social side of our community and trying to make an impact any way you can. So I think when I left, the Afghan refugee crisis was going on. And so I was working 14-hour days. A lot of times those days would start around 10 p.m. and kind of go into the next day to make sure that we were navigating the assistance of refugees as they were trying to cross the border and return to the United States or come to the United States. And Luca helped, obviously. But those are some of the projects that I worked on. I helped a whole lot of folks navigate the federal immigration system, get passports, any federal, I guess, service that existed. I have helped the folks navigate through the bureaucracy to get what they needed out of the government. So and then, their peripheral projects. We navigated COVID. I worked a lot with Swope and others to make sure that we got the needed medicines and vaccine access and food at certain points to the community. So it was a great opportunity for me.
So one of the things I know that you did do in the midst of your federal services that you did run for the school board. So talk a little bit about what prompted you A to run for school board and B, what everyone sort of knows the challenges that KCPS has had in the past in terms of the accreditation issue. There's a growing Hispanic population in the schools, and KCPS, they were talking about school closures. So, what prompted you to even run and deal with all of that?
Yeah, it was an opportunity where a friend of mine, John Fiero, was stepping back from the board and had suggested that I step up. I had previously served on the Guadalupe Center's charter school board 2 years prior to jumping into the Kansas City, Missouri school board. And things sure were different. I think having such a legacy and history of operations within Kansas City Public Schools, it sometimes seemed pretty daunting to try and make an impact. But within my time there, almost 3 years, I had the opportunity to see full accreditation be reinstated through the work of Dr. Bedell and now Dr. Collier, who's taken over as superintendent. And we got an opportunity I at least got an opportunity to learn about the budgeting process and system, finding opportunities for us to provide more supports for teachers and students, activating some of the dollars within our budget that kind of have been forgotten about, to bring greater textbooks to our system, to bring more musical instruments to the district. So I very much thrived in finding my niche within the budget and understanding how that could work better for our kids in our schools.
So everyone sort of knows that, the school district hadn't had, their full accreditation for years and years and years. You were part of that team that helped led the way to getting it back. What was in that process to get there? From the other school boards just couldn't get there, and with the team that Dr. Dell had, what was the process of getting there?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a consistent effort of, I think, 3 total school boards that led to the outcome of full accreditation. And it was constant and unbridled focus on the academic outcomes that we were looking to see. I will have to credit mostly Dr. Bedell and his team, all the way down to the teachers that are in the classrooms, focusing on the main academic principles that would lead us to the necessary scores to get us there. But that also included the other elements of accreditation, including graduation rates and placement after the fact. And so it was really Yeoman's work to bring it all together and meet the goal that would ultimately allow the state board to give us that accreditation. It was truly a pure moment of joy as we got to go down there and hear the state board bring us back into full accreditation.
And Manny, we mentioned earlier about the fact that the school district has a growing Hispanic population. How has the school district, in this urban setting, how is it adapted to meeting those challenges with a larger Hispanic population in the school district?
Well, it is challenged. I think just like any system, whether that's the county, the city, any government system is constantly challenged by the growing populations of once minority groups that are rising to a faster majority. What I saw there was an authentic appreciation for the contributions of the Latino students, but maybe an unfocused effort to truly understand how we could better serve the students. And that was a legacy, I think, that I had left and passed on to my predecessor, Robert Sagastumi, to understand that we have students that are coming into our system that English is their second language, if it's the second at all. And then to get those students to be successful enough to graduate and have an understanding of the language and then the math skills and the reading skills that are equal to their peers is quite challenging. And then also to match the cultural needs and wants of the community, I think is still a challenge that weighs on the district. And so I look forward to seeing their future progress there. But I mean, it could mean anything from making sure the faces look the same, from the teaching staff to the administrative staff. But you have a population of folks who also don't want to become teachers and administrators. And so I don't fault the district alone in that process as much as kind of just a more effort needed to wrangle up and provide better for our community.
And what does that look like in terms of how we recruit teachers that look like the students we're serving? What is the district doing in retrospect to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a genuine recruitment effort. I think even looking at growing your own within KCPS, at least when I left, but it's a challenging environment, right? I mean, I think from what I know, at least police forces are almost commonly in the same type of cycle where you recruit someone, you train someone, and then all of a sudden a suburb next to you pays a little bit more and then recruits that person away, right? The finite resources of bilingual staff is pretty critical that we invest in and grow. But that takes creative efforts from any system governors. And so ensuring that those folks feel appreciated and acknowledged and are financially supported to sustain them within their systems. I think as we look at the county, there's great opportunity. We talk about a bilingual pay program, but when I talk to staff throughout the building, they don't know anything about it. And so are we really providing a service, or are we just acknowledging an opportunity for us to do better in the future? Both are necessary, but in terms of outcomes, that's where we really got to focus.
So I know you have also done a lot with regard to this, the whole piece of budgets and how important that is to different organizations. Um, Talk about your role as the treasurer for the KCPS school board and what your responsibility was there.
Yeah, so ultimately the buck stopped with me, right? My signature was on every check, and I took that responsibility as a weight that weighed heavy on me, and trying to make sure I understood the budget, and not was just regurgitating the notes provided to me by staff, but truly try to dig in and understand, right? And so when I would go to schools and I'd hear things like, well, it'd be nice to have more supplies in our schools. It'd be nice to have art supplies or band equipment. I started to try and unwrap what that really meant. And ultimately, it came down to a cultural circumstance where there's this constant desire for need and want, and a constant packing of, we don't have those dollars to support those things. Well, I look back at our budgets and would see lines that were unspent. And having seen at least one budget year, the first round before COVID, I noticed that there was money there. And so, for some reason, between those appropriators and the decision makers who are pulling the trigger on spending, the teachers weren't receiving those resources. And so eventually, I continue to call those out monthly as we gave reports, driving focused attention towards spending down those funds. When we saw 50% of a budget line that's supposed to be for art supplies or textbooks not being spent down by the end of the budget year, well, that's not a good thing, right? Those resources never make it to a classroom. You're leaving 50% on the table. And a lot of times, most of those resources should be spent 90% at the beginning of the year, because textbooks are used throughout the year. And so making sure that we had a better system for deploying the supplies and addressing the needs across the district ultimately drove us out of that culture to some extent. And if anything, I left, teachers got an opportunity to have $500 per semester to spend in classroom supplies that they got to pick. So those are addressing some of the minor needs that teachers constantly go to their own pockets to fulfill.
So fast forward. So now you are on the Jackson County legislature, which also to know for people that are listening is a pretty big deal because Jackson County hasn't had a Hispanic legislator in how long, Manny? I don't know. How long has it been?
It's a decade, and I am one of four ever since 1827, I believe, or 1887. I can't
Yeah.
remember. So yeah, it's definitely a momentous time, and it's a time that's unique in our community's history, because we have, for the first time, I believe, since at least 30 years, representation on the school board, at the city council, and at the county simultaneously. And so for once in at least my generation, we have full representation.
And I think it's important to note too that your district, though you represent a pretty democratic district, your district is there are not a lot of minorities in your district.
Yeah, it's a unique scenario where I happen to have crossed over a couple different boundaries and lines to gain support from a multitude audience.
So talk about, you've been on the county legislature since January. So how has the first 6 months gone? What have been some of your challenges?
Well, I think I came in with a cadre of folks who all wanted to see dramatic change from the county. And so knowing that we were going to hit the ground running, I think was inherent within our focus. Unfortunately, we run into some roadblocks, realistically, the challenges of governance and bureaucracy. But I've dug in to try and understand again our budget system to see where we can make changes and necessary adjustments to provide better outcomes.
So you are the budget chair at the county. What have been some of the challenges you face there in terms of the budgetary constraints of bureaucracy? And how do you apply that budget so everyday people kind of realize what the county can do for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some education that's needed, right? Making sure that folks understand what our dollars from the county are actually paying for and what their expectations should be, and those dollars being spent. But also their contribution, right? The taxes the property taxes specifically have been quite a challenge as we move forward, and understanding the limited ability that we have as a legislature to impact that system has been disappointing at the greatest end of that spectrum. And so, trying to do the best to educate, and within that system that's defined by others, educating folks on how to navigate that and be successful. So the appeals town halls that many of us held, calling attention to the process and what they could do to properly get relief. We just implemented the SB 190 program through the support of colleagues, and making sure that we had a balanced approach there so that we weren't borrowing from our future by providing relief for our current seniors. Right, as that money has to come from somewhere, and likely it's coming from the budgets of the taxing jurisdictions that are receiving this and providing a service to the community as well. So striking that balance is critically important, and it was important not to rush that and to get it right instead. So we've been able to do a lot around that process. The ARPA money, that was one-time dollars from the federal stimulus money that's supposed to go out and really activate our community and provide greater resource for those in need and impacted by COVID. We put out an RFP process that invited proposals to come in that we're vetting now to see how we can catalyze dramatic change within our communities to solve some of these problems. So our priorities are set in our budget, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to focus on where those priorities will be.
So, in your current role and the previous role that you've had on the school board, what are you doing to sort of reach the next generation of Manny Abarcas in your community so that there's someone to step up and replace you, just like John Fiero asked you to replace him, right? So what are you doing to kind of fill those shoes? Because at some point you're going to step side left and somebody else will fill that role.
Yeah. So first of all, bringing my son to this podcast, right, and making sure that he's listening in to know what's going on in the future. But seriously, I think it's just about the intentionality, right? I have been a product of internship programs myself, and really tried to invest in creating the same in wherever I go. And so I was proud to leave a pretty robust internship program at the congressman's office that ultimately led for the last 4 hires to matriculate through that process into full staff members. And so here at the county, I'd like to do the same thing, right? As we talk about the need for bilingual staff members, I think the internship program that we can build from the legislature could be a robust opportunity for us to lean in, and not just for Latinos, but for anyone, making sure that folks have access and understanding to what we do, are inspired by how we do it, and ultimately trying to take this on in the future. I won't be here forever. Many of us won't, obviously, but leaving that legacy is important to me, and try to make that a point to do it. And so, from even hiring my own staff member, Rebecca in our office is going to outshine me a lot faster than I'm shining in the moment. And so I look forward to all those folks navigating up in the future.
Now, the other thing too, I know that, we always hear that term, especially during presidential years, like elections matter, right? We always hear that term. What advice do you give people who may not want to run for office but want to get involved? I mean, what advice do you give to that person to get involved in their community?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question. I mean, I think do what you can, when you can, how you can. The reality that maybe you can't give $100 to go to a fundraiser, but you can give $1 or you give $5, right? Any contribution helps move that along. If you can't give treasure, maybe you can give your time. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to be the first one there and the last one to leave. I think that's what ultimately led to my success in a lot of places, and understanding that contribution of time is just as important as money. And then finally, kind of putting yourself in situations where you know that it's uncomfortable at the moment, but you're growing, right? I didn't know how to do treasury before I stepped in to be the treasurer of the school district. It was actually a byproduct of a negotiation of me stepping aside from a higher position on the board. But I took it on with interest and with an open mind, and ultimately that led to where I'm at now and understanding some of these very complex financial structures. And so, those opportunities come when you least expect it, and you just got to be ready to step up.
And so, for the person somebody that be listening or come back and listen to this recording and says, "I do want to run for office," and it is a person who doesn't have all the advantages. You have run for office and won, and you have run for office and have lost. What do you think makes the difference for you, in your opinion? And what could that person or should that person do if they want to run for elected office?
I mean, I think timing is everything, right? Making sure that you're strategic about your steps forward and understanding the landscape, right? I mean, if you just jump out there and run against someone who's, say Congressman Cleaver, I want to be your congressman. Well, that's wonderful, but we have an awesome member of Congress now. Maybe the timing isn't the best thing to do. So gauging that and taking smaller steps to get to that point of if that's where your goal and ambition is to be. The other element is perseverance. You had mentioned the loss before. I unfortunately lost by 19 votes, and that was, I think, harder than losing by 1,000 votes. Because you knew that one lunch break or one opportunity where you said, maybe I'll go see a movie instead of being out on the doors meant that I lost that race. Now, I think ultimately that loss led to a springboard for other opportunities. But still, that was a critical moment in my career where I thought, well, maybe I need to step back. I have commonly been in places where I'm behind the scenes, right? As it was a weird dichotomy where I was working for a member of Congress who was very much out front, Congressman Cleaver, for a long time, while also being an elected official myself at the school board, where I was then leading. And so trying to decide whether you want to be in the front or the back was a constant thing in my head. And so I guess here I am, still kind of in the middle, I guess, but navigating the best I can.
So, Manny, I know a big part of your life now is your father and your husband. Talk a little bit about how you have this work-life balance, right? Because you've got a lot going on. You're a legislator, you work full time, you've got a newborn kid. So, talk a little bit about your work-life balance and how you're able to balance all of that.
Well, sometimes it means handing these Cheeto puffs to my son and letting him throw them on the floor and then picking them up later. So, and sometimes like now he eats them. So, um, it just again perseverance I think is critical, and finding the right partner I think is also helpful, right? I mean, knowing that like last night when I had to go from 8 to 8, my wife was ready and willing to step up to the plate and watch the kids. And so I think that type of situation is helpful to me. But it is a challenge, right? One of the most difficult times I think of our relationship was when I was running for office, when she was pregnant. And so we were newlyweds and she was pregnant, and I was working 60, 70 hour day weeks. And so trying to find that balance, knowing that the end of that tunnel would ultimately be this elected position, and a dream of mine for a long time, was an investment. And so you take it in strides. You have the hard conversations when you need to, and move forward as the best you can.
So, as we sort of wrapping up our conversation, one of the things that I think, that you were pretty successful at, and you worked on the congressman's office, there are always, when you have communities of color, there's usually some sort of divide with them. And you were pretty successful in creating, working with the congressman's office, the Black and Brown Coalition. Talk a little bit about that, the purpose of that, and having communities of color work together.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, I don't know if it's directed strategy or just innate opportunity that this occurs, but minority communities are constantly fighting for the least of resources, right? And instead of picking up the crumbs, let's go after pieces collectively. I think that has always been my approach and direction there, and I think the congressman was a good teacher of that. It helps to have friends who come from diverse backgrounds as well, that share this vision and see that shared opportunity. But ultimately, we can accomplish more together than we can apart. And so, taking the time to learn about the different cultures and communities, and understand and step up to the spades table sometimes, and take on your opponents. It's just what you got to do. And so, equally, inviting folks to your community events and cultural celebrations, and sharing in those connected successes, I think is just as important. And so I think that has been a valuable collaboration that I've benefited from for a long time. And it's just about investment and focus and authentic approach. I mean, that too.
And what collaboration is happening, or and Maine, I'm not aware of what collaborations are happening or should be happening between other elected Hispanic leaders, and both in the public sector and the nonprofit sectors.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has been, at least from my perspective, a great opportunity to be able to text elected leaders, not just across the street in the city situation from the county, but across the state. I mean, I just was texting a city councilwoman in St. Louis, and she said, "Hey, I just saw your former boss in DC. We got a project. Let's catch up." And so I don't know what that's about, but the willingness and curiosity to think of a creative project that takes on another effort to advance the community at large, I think is always something that I welcome. And the same is true across different communities, right? I mean, so living in the historic Northeast myself, there's a diversity down my block, multilingual, multi-generational, and taking the time to appreciate and value that, I think has led to stronger relationships and understandings. And so as I approach any topic, I try to think about who's excluded at that table and how can we bring their voices in even if they're not there. Extending that proverbial chair out when somebody's not waiting at the door. So I think being open and building those relationships and being accessible has been helpful because I know now that through the conferences and things that we attend, it only takes one cell phone number to create community bridges across states and across different lines.
Now, and I know from we are a health center and we serve a variety of folks across our community. One of the things that, we've always tried to make sure that we do is that we are a health center that's inclusionary of all folks across this community. What can you do in your elected capacity to help provide more resources for healthier communities and minority communities across this county?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is just realizing the need and chasing the financial opportunities that exist in that vein, right? Not just trying to continue to fund things that we've always funded, but how creatively can we go out and figure out how to reach a new audience, a new group of folks in a different way to have a better outcome. So I think that's definitely there. And then the collaboration again, right? I mean, I think partnerships with organizations that don't have a health focus, but maybe have a creative focus, right? And so Manny Rhodes is a great opportunity where their focus is really on mental health, and physical health is something that they just don't have the capacity to create. And so I know partnerships exist with Manny Rhodes to help fill that void. And so it's things like that, plugging into a bilingual audience by hiring bilingual staff. It's a whole nother market if you're thinking about this from a business perspective that maybe is untouched or underserved. And so presenting that in a way that is accessible and is understanding of that community can create a lot of opportunities.
So, one last question before we end. So, one of the things that I think is really important for folks who've been maybe listening or have been listening to this interview is that um, I think that it's important to know that you didn't come from a famous family. You're not, you went to Grandview High School, which is a great high school, obviously. Um, One of the things that I would ask is like, what do you think made the biggest difference for you to get where you are now?
I mean, I think it was great mentors and realizing that those folks were truly trying to help, no matter their color, creed, or origin. I've had amazing mentors, from teachers at Grandview High School to administrators at my universities, to just people out in the community who took an interest in my future and invested. Now, that investment sometimes meant more work for me, and a lot of times without pay. But those incentives of the access, I think, is really what motivated me to continue. Right. I mean, I had a goal and desire to be where I am now, and taking advantage of those doors when they were even cracked open, and pushing through them and being helped and supported along those ways, I think have definitely made me where I am now.
So, final question we have for we in our interview. What would you say, more of an introspective question? What would you say to a younger Manny or Barca that you know now that you didn't know, say, 15 years ago?
Learn Spanish. Realistically, though, I mean, I think that any opportunity I get to talk to somebody who's bilingual, no matter their status, their position. I was just helping a family from my neighborhood who was having a criminal issue with one of their neighbors, and we were waiting in line to go to court. And I looked at the little high school girl who was there translating for her mother, and I said, "Look, I don't care what people tell you. That right there, your ability to translate is going to get you a $60,000 job starting out anywhere you want, doing whatever you want to do. So how can you use that as a springboard to do whatever you want to do at a greater level, right? That is an opportunity and a door that's wide open for folks. Everyone has need for that. Sometimes in my community, we settle for the secretary administrator when we should be really a vice president or leading an organization because we have that ability that no one else has. And so that is a superpower that I think I should have leaned into more.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I was just in a meeting this morning. That's something that we look for both in our Wyandotte clinics, where we serve a large Hispanic population. So we look for staff that are bilingual. I think you're absolutely right, and those folks are very much in demand, and so those roles are hard to fill. I would absolutely agree with that. So, well, thank you, Manny. I appreciate you taking the time to spend time with our Swope Health and our employees here as we celebrate the first week of Hispanic Heritage Month. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us and on this conversation on this Lunch and Learn. Any
Thanks
final
for
thoughts?
having me. Yeah, I appreciate you all doing this and acknowledging Hispanic Heritage Month. It's something that is very important to many of us, and it's a sure sign of an acknowledgement and investment into the community.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll let you get back to your son. So, thank you again for joining us. And if you missed any of this, this is recorded and it'll be posted on our Swope Health website and our YouTube channel. Thanks again.